You can have a seat.
All right. Thanks, Wayne. And, thank you for sharing in the Lord's table together with me. It's a joy to have a family to do that with, and that we are joined together because of Christ. And so this summer we were in Branson, and if I remember right, I saw this billboard, and oh my goodness, I laughed so hard. And I get back and I'm thinking as I'm going through my sermons, oh, I got to get a picture of that. But you know what? Luckily, a lot of people have, and it's great. Here's the billboard. This year, I think this was in Branson. I'm not sure. My wife couldn't. She remembers seeing it, but we can't remember where. This year, thousands of men will die from stubbornness. No, we won't. You know. Now, I thought the graffiti was supposed to be there, but it's not. But that just makes the sign so much better, doesn't it? Do you like that? We will not die from stubbornness, because I'm too stubborn to die, right? Oh my goodness, I laughed and laughed. But the sad thing is, so I just now, this week, learned what that sign is all about. Like, I didn't know why the sign was there. I didn't know who put it up, what it was for, ahrq.gov. What in the world is that? You can't even read the rest of the writing, and I don't think I read it either. But it's because thousands of men die. In fact, heart disease is the leading cause of death among men and women. So it's not just men. Did y'all hear that? It's the leading cause of death among men and women in America, heart disease. And generally, heart disease is something that you can detect and, to some degree, prevent. Did you know that? Like, it's dealing with the plaque and your cholesterol and the health of your heart is the number one leading cause. Now, if you said, hey, if I knew I could prevent cancer, would you do it? But heart disease, and so it says thousands of men die from stubbornness because, and generally, men don't get their annual physicals. They don't go do these checkups and things, and women more often do. That's why this is targeted to, that's right, it's us. And I realized, who was my last physical? Oh, don't ask. Probably as often as I go see the dentist. But I went 6 months ago for the first time since we were married. Like 17 years. And my teeth were okay, so I can be stubborn, right? No, I can't. But, okay, here's my point. Spiritually speaking, how many of that is this sign for us? We are too stubborn to look at and to see and to allow the Lord to work in our hearts. I don't want to go there. I don't want to do that. I am just fine the way I am. You know, I don't want to do that. And we can be just like that, can't we? And Christ comes along and says, I've got something so much better for you. And yet you're heading this way, and I try to warn you, I try to let you know, I try to either prod your conscience or send someone in your life who wants to say something about it, to try to get your attention, and you just keep ignoring it. And by the grace of God, we have a Savior, Jesus Christ, who washes us clean. Amen to that? Oh man, because I'm guilty. But we also have a God who loves us so much, when we start heading that way, He's not just going to let us go. He's going to try to bring us back. And aren't you glad we have a God like that? I sure am. Because He wants something better for us, and we are convinced in our mind that the way we're going is just fine. In fact, it's probably even better than any other way. Otherwise, we wouldn't have taken that way. And so we start heading that way. And aren't you glad we have a God who says, whoa, wait a minute. You didn't hear me the first time. I'm going to do something. Look, I got to get your attention. Hey, wake up, wake up, wake up. You're heading the wrong way. And that's what God did for Israel. And last week I introduced this book of Hosea, and we see God's amazing love. And he starts off by sharing this story This outrageous request that God tells his prophet Hosea to go and get a wife of harlotry and to have kids. And then she goes back into harlotry. And he says, go buy her back, redeem her again. And he says, because this is what my people are doing to me. They are unfaithful. And they're leaving me. And he sent prophet after prophet. We went through Elijah. We didn't go through, but I mentioned Elijah, Elisha, Amos. All these prophets had all come before. Even others. Those prophets were... anyway, yeah. And now Hosea is coming. And it's like, this is your final warning. You are heading the wrong way, and God wants to pull us back. And this isn't just this. And I want to be careful because today can so easily become a browbeating, which means shame on you, you're worthless, and all that. And I don't want it to become that. So I have to be careful because as religious people, that's often what happens, isn't it? And it's not. It's not that. But it's that God is saying, I'm not just going to let you run away out into the street in front of all these cars and kill yourself. I'm going to step in your way. I'm going to intervene, and I'm going to do something about it. And his amazing love doesn't want us to ignore. He doesn't want to ignore our waywardness and do nothing. It's interesting, our girls were watching Beauty and the Beast last night, and that's one of the things. Remember when I don't know who said it, if it was the teapot, is she said, how did this happen? It's because we stood by and watched and did nothing and let the beast, let this young man become the beast. And it's like, whoa, that hit me because that's exactly what God is not going to do. He's not just going to step back and do nothing. He cares for you. He loves you, and he's going to intervene. And so when he sees you being stubborn, again, he puts this life lesson, living object lesson of Hosea going and marrying a harlot. Outrageous. And he's now going to build his case to say, Israel, listen, here's what you're doing. And so he builds his case with the people of Israel. So turn to chapter 4, and it says, listen to the word of the Lord, O sons of Israel, for the Lord has a case against the inhabitants of the land. Because there is no faithfulness or kindness or knowledge of God in the land. Instead, there is swearing and deception and murder and stealing and adultery. They employ violence so that bloodshed follows bloodshed, and therefore the land mourns. Everyone who lives in it languishes along with the beasts of the field and the birds of the sky and the fish of the sea disappear. And let no one find fault, and let no one offer reproof, for your people are like those who contend with the priest. So you will stumble day by day, and the prophet will stumble with you by night, and I will destroy your mother. And my people are destroyed for this lack of knowledge, because they have rejected knowledge. And I also then will reject you from being my priest, and since you have forgotten the law of your God, I will forget your children. And he goes on, but he gets this picture, this case he's beginning to build. But at the heart of it, he says, there is no faithfulness or kindness or knowledge of God in this land. Verse 6, my people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge because they have actually rejected knowledge. God desires us for us to know him, not just go through the motions. And the people of God don't really know who God is, even though to some degree, and this is maybe more in Amos, if you read the book of Amos, he's a prophet that came before Hosea. He cries out because he says, you're practicing all these festivals, you're celebrating all these Jewish, it's like you're following all the rituals of Judaism, but it's empty. He says, I hate your festivals, I don't like your worship, it's just noise to me because your hearts aren't with me. Well, now you get to Hosea and he says, boy, you're not even doing that. You're not even doing that. But again, he's building this case. There is not faithfulness or kindness or knowledge of God in the land. And to some degree, yes, there were, but we're going to get on and we're going to see how this is the case. But his first building the case, God desires us to know him, not just go through the motions, because there's no knowledge of God. To know God, to know about God is different than knowing God. And you could say a lot of people might know about God, right? They have some facts down. They know they can answer maybe on a theological test the right answers. But there's a lot of people in our world, in our society, they're becoming more and more, we're becoming an unchurched society. They don't even know the basics. a lack of knowledge. And this was common in Israel. They were more and more, they didn't know God. And they might say, oh yeah, we're God's people. Well, what does that mean? And what he says here is, I'm building a case, there is no faithfulness or kindness. Those two words, hesed and hein, are Greek words meaning faithfulness. Hesed is his covenant, or loving kindness is another way it's translated. There is no loving kindness. And this is one of God's, if you want to say, a primary characteristic of who God is. The other one is his mercy or grace, his hein, his kindness, undeserved kindness. And these two things, that God is faithful covenant-keeping God, and he is gracious and merciful. It's interesting that when God first introduces himself to the nation of Israel, these are two of the primary characteristics. And then they get repeated. You read through the Psalms. We have a God with loving kindness and his grace or mercy. And these two characteristics really reflect the heart of who God is. And he says, you don't know me anymore. There is no faithfulness. There is no kindness in the land. He says, because if you knew me, not just knew about me, if you knew me, you would begin to reflect me. You would honor me. You would fear me. And you would live this out. But he says, you're not. Instead, and if you go now, instead what's happening, there is swearing. And this swearing, I know in my cross-references and other places, it goes back directly to thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. That the swearing is, they're even swearing an oath in the name of the Lord and then breaking it. They're taking the Lord's name in vain. There's deception, lying. There's murder. There's stealing. There's adultery. Do you notice of those five, how many of those are breaking one of the Ten Commandments? Well, all of them are, specifically, right? And if you go back to the Ten Commandments, those are five of the Ten Commandments. He's saying, you don't understand the heart of God. That when I gave you these commandments, it's not just a list of rules to follow, it's a reflection of my heart. I want you to be holy as I am holy. I want you to be set apart, a different nation, a different people, to reflect me and my goodness to the whole world. And you're missing it. And he's saying that what is happening in your lives, in fact, reveals a lack of understanding of who I am and what I've called you to. There is no true knowledge. Even if you could answer a test and say, these are the Ten Commands, are you really reflecting that in your lives? God desires us to know him. So how does this then, the question I have is, because Hosea is marrying a prostitute to reflect, and then a woman who then goes into prostitution and to reflect Israel and how they have prostituted themselves against God. So how does this reflect prostitution? Like, I lie once in a while. I don't try to. Sometimes I accidentally, I dare to, tell my daughter something. And she says, well, Daddy, you said we were going to go now, and we're not. I'm like, oh, I changed my mind. Well, again, I got to be careful what I say. Does that mean I'm prostituting myself against God? What's going on here? But this is, we could say this isn't just an accidental thing. This is becoming more and more a part of their life. This is just common, what you'd see among the people of this nation who are God's people. They're not living the ways he's called them to. And more, rather than reflecting his heart, they're reflecting the heart of what he is trying to set them apart. I want you to be holy and set apart as I'm holy. They're not being holy at all. They're reflecting the ways of the world. But why is this spiritual adultery? Comparative to Hosea and Gomer. When we begin, and he says it here in chapter 4, verse 6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge because you have rejected knowledge. This isn't just oops, I guess I didn't remember that part. It was a rejection of. That there is a purposeful, intentional saying, I don't want to go that way. I want to live this way. They're rejecting God's ways. and ignoring the laws of your God. And that's the end of verse 6. Since you have forgotten the law of your God. And that forgotten it's almost like that's an intentional. I'm trying to forget. I don't want to remember those laws. I want to live my own way. I don't like living with a guilty conscience. And so there's an attempt to just saying, I'm through with that. And so, again, this covenant relationship that Israel had, there was this agreement that as God's people, they had promised, and if you go back to the covenant, and this is all the way back in Exodus chapter 19, is the first time they made this covenant. Verse 5, now then, if you indeed will obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples. For all the earth is mine, God said, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel. So Moses came and he called the elders of the people and set them before them all these words, which the Lord commanded. And the people answered and said together, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. They joined in this covenant with God. And they were now saying, no, forget that. I'm rejecting that. It's like entering into a covenant, a marriage covenant, saying, no, forget that. I'm rejecting that. It's like adultery. And this covenant that God had made, they are now rejecting. They're now stepping away from it and saying, no. Okay, my grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, generations ago made that covenant, but that's not for me. And it wasn't just one or two people. As a nation, this was becoming more and more common. They were rejecting God. So how do you think God felt when this happened? What's interesting is this is exactly what the covenant stated would happen. I mean, they knew as part of the covenant, if they would reject God, Leviticus 26, 14 through 16, that right away when the covenant was given, the consequences of that are listed. If you do not obey me, do not carry out these commands, instead if you reject my statutes, and if your soul abhors my ordinances so as to not carry out all my commands, and you break my covenant, I in turn will do this to you. I will appoint over you a sudden terror, consumption, fever that will waste away the eyes and cause the soul to pine away. Also you will sow your seed uselessly, for your enemies will eat it up. I'll set my face against you, so that you will be struck down before your enemies, and those who hate you will rule over you, and you will flee when there is no one pursuing you. And he goes on to, they knew that a part of the covenant was these consequences. So God's not being cruel. He's not trying to say, oh, I got you now. He's just trying to say, I hate to do this. This breaks my heart. But this is what you agreed to as my people. God also began to realize that he was not the object of worship. They were turning to other places to worship. And God is the only object of worship that really can satisfy us. He knows he is the one true God. There is no other God. And when we try to turn to other things in place of God, it's never going to satisfy. And here we see the people doing that. Harlotry, wine, and new wine take away understanding. My people consult the wooden idol. Their diviner's wine forms them, and the spirit of harlotry has led them astray. They have played the harlot, departing from their God. They offer sacrifices on the tops of mountains. These are at sacrifices to other gods, other shrines. They're not according to the sacrifices God's commanded them. They burn incense on the hills under the oak, poplar, terebinth, because their shade is pleasant, and therefore your daughters play the harlot, and your brides commit adultery. Even their daughters were now, temple prostitution was common in the foreign gods of those nations, and now their own daughters were being given away as temple prostitutes. Whether given away or allowed to become, to join in the worship of these foreign gods. And God said, this is not what I've called you to. You are to worship me, the first command. I'm Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. And yet, what were they doing? They were very much worshiping other gods, going to other gods. In the first verse 6, he's addressing the leaders, the priests. Verse 12, he's addressing the people and their response. As a nation, they were all moving that direction. And God desires worship from sincere hearts. To worship the Lord our God only is to give him the worth he deserves, that he is the one true God. To give him the honor, the trust, the attention he deserves. And in Hosea 4:10 it says they have stopped giving heed to the Lord. They have stopped giving heed. Sin is not just all the bad things we do. Sin is also obeying the things he's called us to do. The apathy and the complacency and the saying that, I'm just fine. I don't need to do all that. I don't need to follow after God. That our sin is we miss the mark of God's design for us, that we are actually his workmanship, which he has created in Christ Jesus. Again, it's not in ourselves, it's in Christ, that we can then walk in them, these good deeds that he's prepared for us beforehand, that we would walk in them. Sin isn't just missing the mark by living an ungodly life. It's missing the mark by not even walking in the life that he has designed us to have. It's not giving him the worth, the honor, the attention he deserves. And here they are beginning to then give. So when we all care about something, right? Our youth at Air Share learned that last week. We all care about something. The question is, what do we care about? And the same question is of worship. We all worship something. In other words, we give worth and value and priority to something. What is it in our life that gets that value and priority? And if it's God, that's what we worship. And if it's something else, in a way, that's what we begin to worship. It gets more value and priority. And so the loyalty in their worship was undermined by their pluralism. Here they were consulting wooden idols, using diviner's wands. It's like there's different ways that they would try to get wisdom. I don't know what to do. What should I do? What's God's design for us? Is it to go and cast the dice or throw the lot or drop the sticks? No. We're to go to God and seek his wisdom. We are to turn to him, not to all these other ways. And here they are sacrificing on top of mountains, burning incense. I mean, you even get the picture that they're even sacrificing their own kids to these fertility gods, thinking if I give up my kid, then God's going to bless our nation. The false God is going to bless our nation and make us fruitful and all this. And it was far from the truth they had given him. So what was wrong with this? I mean, yeah, it's a direct violation of the command, of the covenant. But what's wrong with that? Well, and what happens is the knowledge of God, the fear of God wasn't being passed on to the next generation. Instead, it wasn't just personal sin. It was now becoming a community sin that now there are these common places that we're going. And as a community, we're practicing this temple prostitution and harlotry. I mean, it's not just becoming an individual thing. It's becoming a corporate thing. In a way, it's like going to the candy store for groceries. I mean, how would you like that, kids? Oh, candy store for groceries? Like, I'm going to make a meal, and it's going to be cake and brownies and ice cream, and how long can you survive on that? You're going to face the consequences of that very soon. And when we turn the wrong places for what only God can nourish and satisfy and fill us with, there's going to be consequences. And to say, I'm perfectly happy doing this. I just don't like it. I'm perfectly happy eating candy all the time. I just don't like it that my teeth are rotting. That's the problem. Well, you begin to realize, no, the problem isn't just the rotten teeth. The problem is what's causing that. And as a nation, they were in denial that all the consequences of their actions were a result of hearts that had turned away from God. The hypocrisy of their worship was revealed in their disobedience. And God even says here, if you read on and look ahead to Hosea chapter 6, verses 6 and following, it says there, "For I delight in loyalty rather than sacrifice." And to some degree, they were still bringing sacrifices to God. In addition to going up on the high places and sacrificing up there and burning the incense over there. He said, I desire the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. But like Adam, they have transgressed the covenant, and there they have dealt treacherously against me. Gilead is a city of wrongdoers, tracked with bloody footprints, and as raiders wait for a man, so a band of priests murder on the way to Shechem. Surely they have committed crime. In the house of Israel I have seen a horrible thing. Ephraim's harlotry is there, and Israel has defiled itself. I mean, this was no longer just a few people individually doing this. Became a community problem. And God cries out. And next week we're going to look at how God draws them back and paints the picture of where he wants to go with them and restore them. But this week we're looking at this case he's building. So their worship, that God was no longer a priority. In our lives, that becomes an issue. God is no longer a priority. Not only do we not really know the heart of God, and now we begin to put other things in priority over him. That's something we have to deal with as well. And thirdly, then, that God designed us to need him for security. That we need him. And now, not only individually were they lacking this knowledge of God, community-wise, they were turning to other gods. Nationally, they even were going to other nations for the help and the security and the support that God said, you're to come to me for. And he begins to lay this out. There's a few different places in chapter 7. He began to see this. Verse 8, Ephraim mixes himself with the nations. Ephraim has become a cake not turned. Strangers devour his strength, yet he does not know it. Gray hairs are also sprinkled on him, and he doesn't even realize it. Though the pride of Israel testifies against him, yet they have not returned to the Lord their God, nor have they sought him for all this. So Ephraim has become like a silly dove without sense. And here it says, they call out to Egypt. They go to Assyria. And when they go, God says, I will spread my net over them, and I will bring them down like birds of the sky, and chastise them in accordance with the proclamation of their assembly. Woe to them, for they have strayed from me, and destruction is theirs, and they have rebelled against me. I would redeem them, but they speak lies against me, and they do not cry to me from their heart. When they wail on their beds, for the sake of grain and new wine, they assemble themselves, yet they turn away from me, although I train and strengthen their arms, and yet they devise evil against me. They turn not upward. They are like a deceitful bow. Their princes will fall by the sword because of their insolence of their tongue. This will be their derision in the land of Egypt. They're turning to these other countries. They're turning to Assyria for help. They're turning to Egypt for help, rather than turning to the Lord. And it's interesting that throughout Israel's identity as a nation, one of the things God said is I am your strength. I am your shield. I am the one who defends you. And you see this all the way back. They were taught this or exemplified this in a way. The first lesson was they stood between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army came after them. You remember what God said to them? As a nation, he said, do not fear. Stand by and see the salvation of the Lord. The Lord will fight for you while you keep silent. And God parted the Red Sea and took them through it and brought it down and destroyed Pharaoh's army. And it's interesting that same concept is reaffirmed over and over, that God is the one who's going to fight for them. In Deuteronomy, as they're preparing to enter the promised land, again, he says, you're going to enter a land with people bigger than you and stronger than you. Even the Anakim live there, the giants. And you remember 40 years ago, when you guys were afraid to go into the land because of them, he says, they live there, but do not fear them, for the Lord your God goes before you, and will himself fight on your behalf. And they were modeled that as they walked up to Jericho and marched around the city, and what happened to the walls? They fell. Who did that? God did that. And as they conquered the land, God says, you can trust me. You don't have to go to these other nations and other armies. You can trust me. And at the end of Joshua, after they've conquered most of the land, they weren't even faithful in doing all of it. But Joshua says to them in Joshua 23:10, cling to the Lord your God. He has driven out the great and the strong nations before you. It's the Lord your God. It is he who is fighting for you, just as he promised. And the call is to continue to cling to him, not to turn to other nations. And it's interesting that as Israel goes along, there are times that other nations stand before them, like King Hezekiah, and the Assyrian army surrounded him, and he prays to God, saying, God, deliver them. They're mocking your name. And God sends his angel and wipes out the Assyrian army. That's after this time. But again, you see that this principle is something Hezekiah chooses to turn to rather than away from. And yet the people in Hosea's day, as a nation, they were turning away from God to these other nations. And it says that we speak lies to the very one who can help us. Chapter 4, verse 18 says that. No, that's not it. I read it. Anyway, but we even lied to the one who can help. We follow empty promises and ignore the truth. Oh, that's what 4:18 is for. It says, even when their drinks are gone, they continue their prostitution. Their rulers dearly love shameful ways. It's like we don't want to admit how miserable we are in this condition, so we're just going to lie to ourselves and keep pursuing it. Misery. Hosea 7:13, woe to them who strayed from me. Destruction is theirs. They've rebelled against me. I would redeem them, but they speak lies against me. They're the ones blaming God for the problems rather than recognizing it's their own fault. And it was no longer just a personal community. This was a national sin. Where is it that we turn to other places for help or for security rather than to the Lord? And it's almost like that stubbornness, our stubbornness is going to end up killing us because we don't want to admit we aren't. And this is the beauty of Hosea, is God is inviting us into this intimate relationship with him. And so often we want to deny that we lack that intimacy because we like the way we're going. And that's what's so sad is in chapter 7, verse 9, it says here, strangers devour his strength, yet he does not know it. Gray hairs are sprinkled on him. His life is coming to an end, but he doesn't even know it. We want to deny this reality that we're missing. We're missing what God has intended for us. And the beauty of it is that God in his amazing love is saying, come back. Come back. I'm not pushing you away. I'm not saying this is a road that you are so far on that you don't even bother coming back. He's saying, no, call out to me, come back to me. And next we're going to look at that. That God's design for restoration is to give us, to revive us and give us new life. And not just to push us off. And we're going to see how he doesn't want us to relive past mistakes. He wants us to reach and be revived with the fruitfulness that comes of walking with him. So examine your heart. Like Israel, are there times we're putting other priorities first? We're too stubborn to really examine. Do I love God completely? Do I know him? It's not fun to do that, but it is important to say, God, search my heart, know me, try me, even my inward thoughts, and then revive me according to your ways. What is it that's taking priority over Christ, over God, and a transforming faith in our walk with him? Where is it that other things begin to take place of that? And how are we even deceived into thinking that's really better than what he has to offer? And then where do we turn for help, for hope, for strength for each day? Are we continuing to turn to God? And as we do, again, allow him to draw you in, to renew you, to revive you, to rebuild you, because that's the beauty of what he wants to do. Even when we've strayed, God comes back to us. Just like Hosea went to Gomer and he redeemed her. He brought her back and said, hey, there's something so much better waiting. Dear Lord, I thank you that because of your sacrifice that we remember today, that we don't stand here hopeless, but we stand here full of hope, knowing, Lord, I can't fix everything that's wrong with me. Lord, I'm a mess. I see ways in which all of these things can be true of me to a degree, let alone the society in which we live. And Lord, to try to bring healing to a broken society is impossible in our own strength. But Lord, I thank you that that's where the good news comes in. And that's where the healing and the grace and the forgiveness that you offer through Jesus Christ not only is good for me, it's good for everyone out there. And I pray, Lord, that you'll help each of us experience that. To see how we have really benefited from this restoration promise that you've given to us in Jesus Christ because of his redemption, so that we can now carry this good news to the world around us, Lord. Open our hearts. Build a case against us to realize, Lord, that we are not holy apart from you. And Lord, as we stand here, it's only by your grace that we then can walk in the holiness and the good works that you have designed for us. So I pray that you pour out your grace upon us, that we might reflect and honor you in every way. Examine our hearts. Examine my heart. That we might find the healing and the hope that you have to offer. In your name we pray.